Have you ever felt overwhelmed by a task that seemed too big to handle all at once? Now imagine how it feels if you were learning a whole new skill or someone trying to maintain independence while experiencing cognitive or physical decline. This is where forward and backward chaining can be game changers. Today we'll explore these step-by-step techniques and how they can be used to teach new skills, promote independence, and help people thrive, even when they're facing challenges like dementia and acquired brain injury. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today we're going to be talking about a couple of principles referred to as forward and backward chaining. Now, forward and backward chaining are actually methods for teaching or reinforcing complex skills by breaking them down into smaller, manageable steps. Each step builds on the previous one, making tasks less daunting and more achievable. Now, all of us have done this to some degree, and this is where many of the principles that I refer to of that kind of common sense principles that we apply when we're, raising a child to anybody. If we're teaching a child to tie a shoelace, we tend to break it down into chunks. We have methodologies that we use to teach it. And that's exactly what forward and backward chaining is. But it's sometimes we expect people to just know stuff, and it's a good opportunity for us to really reflect on a teaching practice, if you like. Often when I'm teaching, let's say, one of the things I do is I teach martial arts skills. And to be able to teach martial arts is very different from learning martial arts. Because when you're learning it, you just kind of copy what the instructor does a little bit, you mimic it, and you just kind of flow through. But an instructor has to kind of break it down into chunks. So well, you start off with this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this. So exactly the same as learning any new skill, from a shifting over to that teacher mentality can be a new thing for some people, especially if you're caring for a loved one that you've never had to teach them anything before. They've always just known stuff. So let me tell you the difference between forward and backward chaining. So forward chaining is teaching the steps of a task in order, starting from the first step and then adding one step at a time. Whereas backward chaining is actually teaching them in the reverse order. So the individual starts with the last step in the process and then works backwards from there. Now, both methods focus on progress and success, helping the person feel capable and confident at each of those different stages. Okay. So the idea is that chaining works because it reduces or removes some of the overwhelm that an entire task can create by trying to achieve it all at once. So instead of focusing on the whole, it builds skills incrementally, ensuring each step is manageable and reinforcing positive outcomes along the way, which allows those opportunities for positive reinforcement, but also skill mastery, building confidence by, hey, if I could do that little bit, maybe I could do a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. So this is particularly effective for learning new skills. So for instance, like tying your shoes or cooking a meal, we tend to, with cooking a meal, you follow instructions, you follow the procedure. But there may be things that you have to learn before you're able to cook that recipe in the book, because there may be certain terms or certain activities within there that you might need to learn first. Okay, we'll come back to that. It also is really effective for maintaining independence. We might find that a person maybe can't do a complete task anymore, but there's still bits of it they can do. Maybe they could do the last step in the process. If we took an example of, let's say, getting dressed, I may not be able to, organize my clothes in the right order. I may not be able to kind of, through mobility issues or through coordination difficulties, be able to necessarily kind of get the clothes onto myself very well. But maybe I can just do up the last few buttons. Maybe I can just put the shirt on. Maybe even just putting a scarf or a hat on. There may be a bit of the process that I can do, and then we'll kind of work backwards from there. But we're always trying to give that person the opportunity to be independent for themselves, to get successes, to go, hey, look, you can still do this. And if you can still do this, there is other things that you can do. And it's also about that rebuilding of confidence, isn't it? Helping those with any kind of where there's a loss of ability for whatever reasons, regain those skills that they may have lost. And it's really important that we try and rebuild through successes rather than failures, especially when the brain is rewiring. When the brain is rewiring, obviously everything that we do is kind of creates a neuron pathway. But when the brain is rewiring after some kind of acquired brain injury, whether that be a stroke or traumatic, it's really important to make sure that it's wiring on the successes rather than wiring on the failures. Forward chaining begins with teaching the very first step. Once that's mastered, we can add the next step, and so on until the task is then learned. The focus is on building foundation and kind of moving forwards from there. So let's say we were teaching something simple, like making a cup of tea, for instance. So we might start off with teaching somebody how to fill the kettle with water, then plugging it in and turning it on, then adding boiling water into the routine, or boiling the water into the routine. Our step 3 might be placing a tea bag into the cup. Our step 4 might be pouring water into the cup. Now, we might say, well, why can't we do all of that in one go? Well, for some individuals, that might be too much hard work in one go, especially if they're rehabilitating or they're learning this new skill and they've got sort of additional challenges, or it's much harder for them. So therefore, we might need to go, okay, well, hey, if we can get them as far as just being able to fill the kettle with water, and we keep doing that, that builds their confidence, that builds their ability, that builds their resilience to that particular task as well. And then we can move on to the next step. Rather than our expectation is sometimes, well, you should be able to do this by now. Okay, so each step is taught in order, and the person is supported until they master it. This process ensures that logical flow as well, because sometimes it isn't about knowing how to do each individual task. It's knowing how to get the order right. So we're building up the sequence step by step, because this is when sometimes where there's overwhelm, because I've got to remember. So for instance, a big part of doing any activity that we take for granted is the planning and visualization of that activity. To visualize that activity, I've got to hold it in my mind's eye, which is, there's so much related to that we take for granted as far as all the sensory experience we've had throughout our life that's built up our ability to be able to do that. So anything that's either damaged that or affects that development can mean that something that we take for granted as putting things in the right order or doing things in a certain set order might actually be really challenging for this person. So we might need to find that we go, hey, let's start creating a routine of this. We do step 1, then step 2, then step 3, rather than it seeming obvious, or it may seem obvious to us. Each step builds on the previous one. So we focus on those foundational skills. We ensure the basics are solid before moving forwards. Have they got this skill down? It's great for new learners as well. It hopes those unfamiliar with the task feel more confident as they progress. Now, this is where we have to be kind of mindful of what skills are there required for any activity. Let's take one that most people are able to do, and that's something like riding a bike. Well, there might be loads of forward chaining steps to be able to ride a bike. So it might be actually being able to recognize a bike, could be a starting point, being able to know what a bike is. Then it might be a case of just being able to cope with holding the handles and sitting on the saddle. That may be for some as far as some people can get initially until they build up some confidence. Then it's about using the brakes, about how to move the handles of the steering bar. This is before you've even started moving. Then we're working on balance and coordination. We might find that, hey, this person needs to do a lot of work as far as building their balance and coordination before we start looking to get them into a bike situation and send them off on their way. So this is where we need to be really mindful of when we're looking at a task, we need to break it down into knowing this person that we're supporting, that we're teaching, that we're working with. What are their abilities? And therefore, what are maybe their challenges that we need to sort of build from the bottom up? So let's look at why the difference is backward chaining. So backward chaining is about focusing on the teaching the last step as the task first. Once a person masters the final step, then you move backwards to the second to last step, and so on, until they can complete the entire task again. So the whole objective is we still want them being able to do the whole thing, but let's turn it around. So I gave the example earlier of kind of getting dressed, for instance. Okay, so let's say we're just dressing with a shirt. Imagine you're helping somebody with dementia learn or maintain the ability to put on a shirt. Okay. We might start with just the last button. Hey, can we still do that? You know, they might find their coordination, their ability to kind of plan everything is quite challenging to do. So we might start with doing the last button first. And if they can just do that, hey, they're still maintaining. Then maybe we can help them and teach pulling the shirt over their shoulders, followed by the last button. Then putting one arm through a sleeve, then pulling it over the shoulders and buttoning. And finally, working with them to pick up the shirt and put it on completely and button it up. Now, it might be to help them to do that. There's part of us that are learning this process as well. But it isn't just necessarily about them learning. It's also, so what are they still able to do? And what can I do to help them? So maybe, for instance, this person could still get themselves dressed if everything was placed on the bed in the order they needed to put it on their body. Now, again, that may seem obvious for us, but it's all about recognizing potential cognitive impairments or difficulties in learning or whatever it is. Kind of go, well, the problem is, it is a skill to be able to know that I need to put my underwear on first before I put my trousers on the top. So if, let's say they're laid on the bed and the trousers are on top of the pants, well, what order should I do things in? Well, the concrete order that I should do things in is I'm going to put the first thing that's at the top, I'm going to put that on myself. The abstract concept of getting dressed is going to be to move the trousers and put the underwear on first. But this requires certain cognitive skills to be able to do. So it may be, well, this person isn't able to do that. So when I lay the stuff out, I'm going to put it in the order that they need to put it on. Okay? Just trying to promote their independence. They are capable of doing some of it. They may not be capable of doing the same that we think they should or that we are. So backward chaining ensures a person experiences success. That's the big thing. They get some success out of it. If they fail at the beginning, sometimes it could be then you take over and there's nothing else left. Or if we can succeed at the end, just that little bit, again, it can build confidence. This isn't just people with cognitive decline. This is how some people teach children. Just do that last little bit for me. I've done it with kids where it's a case of, we'll, doing their top last, but hey, let's see if you can do this now. And we start doing that bit first, and then we move backwards and get them ultimately getting themselves completely dressed. Now, the benefits of the backward chaining is you've got that immediate success. That one little task is, hey, they succeeded. Okay? So starting with the final step, lets a person experience reward straight away. Helps the individual feel capable from the start. It also supports with cognitive decline by reinforcing the most rewarding part of the task as well. The final bit of, because if you do have somebody with cognitive decline, if they fail at the beginning, that's what they remember. Whereas if they succeed at the end, that's what the feeling they're left with. They may not remember how they got help beforehand. They might remember the fact that, hey, look what I did. Look how I just finished what I was doing. Look how I still succeeded and was able to do that. So forward chaining is really useful when the individual's learning a completely new skill. The task requires mastery from the foundation steps and it's breaking down. So even baking a cake, it could be, well, let's start with the basics of cracking an egg and putting it into a bowl without the shell joining it, for instance. And we may do that until this person's able to do it. And then we carry on cooking the cake for now, but then they slowly move forward through the steps and get further and further along from doing it themselves. Also, the person thrives on sequential logical progression. If they enjoy that concept, if we do this, then we do this, then we do this, then we do this, if they quite enjoy that concept, then actually that's where forward chaining can be really positive. So backward chaining, when confidence is a little bit lower, some motivation's a little bit lower, sometimes backward chaining is a better way of doing it because it can give that early success. It can give that dopamine hit of, hey, I did that. At the beginning, it can feel like it's the insurmountable mountain. So let's use that as an analogy. For some people, They want to start at the bottom and go, hey, let me just see how far I can get up the mountain, and then we'll try again tomorrow. And it's that step by step, and we'll slowly get further up the mountain and further up the mountain and further up the mountain. For some individuals, they'll just look at the mountain and go, that's too much for me. I'll never make it. I'll never be able to do it. So instead, what we do is we might fly them to the top of the mountain and then or maybe just 5 feet from the top of the mountain and go, hey, let's just try and get to the top from here. If we can do that, then we've still reached the peak. And then we might go, hey, next time, why don't we go a little bit further down the mountain and walk 10 feet up to the peak? Because it was really nice getting to the top last time. Let's see if we can go a little bit further to get to the top this time. So you got those two, and this is knowing the personality based on the skills, the circumstance, what they're able to do beforehand. Have they got the foundation? So straight away, we can kind of decide, right, is this person going to be better to start at the top of the mountain and kind of will slowly get them lower and lower? Or are they better to start at the bottom and we slowly get them higher and higher? And I say that's an element of knowing the person that you're working with is really important. If the individual struggles with the complexity of earlier steps, because it does depend on the nature of the activity itself, doesn't it? If it's really complex at the beginning, but there's simple steps at the end, maybe we're building those skills of coordination, or maybe we're building those skills of understanding and abstract concepts. And then we may, as we get them more complex, as they get better. So again, it's all the task makes a difference, the person makes a difference. I've given you a few examples as I was going through there of the type of environment that might be useful in. So as we say, in dementia care, it's really useful for carers, even if you're not going to instigate this process of forward and backward chaining. If you are caring for a loved one, you may, they used to be able to get themselves dressed, but now they're struggling. You need to kind of look at this as, how can I break this activity down into steps? And what are they still capable of, or what do they find difficult? If balance is a real issue, they might find that, putting their trousers on is a real challenge for them now, but they're okay sitting down and still doing their shirt completely. So we work to the strengths at all times whenever we're supporting somebody with any level of cognitive decline. If somebody enjoys gardening but struggles with starting it, you can guide them to the final step. Let's not worry about the potting. Let's not worry about the weeding. Let's just do some watering, for instance. And you can cut this. There's a wonderful instrument out there. It's called the pool instrument, or the PAL instrument. And it's a way of assessing a person's actual abilities. And then you can look at activities to what's the best way of setting them up for them to be able to succeed. We may do another episode or a podcast on the PAL instrument, because it's really, really useful. But you can utilize that, and you've used forward and backward chaining as part of that PAL instrument. So we're doing it, let's say, baking a cake. I may not be able to bake a full cake now, but I can find the egg. Okay. Or I can pick up the egg, or I can whisk the egg in a bowl with a whisk, maybe with some support. With acquired brain injury, when we're reteaching skills, it can be really difficult as far as regressing back to, well, how do we actually do something? There's so many things that we do automatically, like, washing yourself, for instance. You just do it. You don't think about doing it. A wonderful example of this is when I'm teaching things like moving and handling people training. One of the activities I do is I get people to write down a list of, how do you stand up? And it's actually surprisingly difficult to people to break it down steps, because there's part of them that just wants to go, well, you just stand, don't you? You just do it. But actually, if you break it down into steps and work out, okay, so what do I do as far as my positioning to start off with? Where do I put my feet? Where do I put my hands? Where does my head move to? Where do I push? Where do I apply force? Where do I apply momentum to actually get to the point of being able to stand up? And by breaking the process down of something as simple as just standing up, it helps us to better understand, well, how can I help somebody to do it? What out of that activity can they really do? Well, maybe they can't stand, but maybe they can position their own legs in the right place. Maybe they can arch their bum towards the edge of the chair by themselves, even if they can't just stand up in the minute. And again, the more they can do themselves, the better. One, because it means that we're not having to do it, but it's also about maintaining those physical skills. Obviously, it's a fantastic skill for teaching children, whether it be brushing their teeth or tying their shoes. And I say whether it be backward chaining or it be forward chaining, sometimes it's about the activity, but it's also about the child. It's also about what suits you. What's your way of teaching it that works for the way that you understand the activity? So when we're looking at the tips for success on this, make sure we individualize the approach. Every person's different. So therefore, tailor the steps based on their abilities, their pace, and their preferences. Make sure you provide clear prompts and reinforcement as well, and make sure the reinforcement is suitable for the person. Give clear, consistent instructions and celebrate those small successes, but encourage them to celebrate their own successes as well. It's that pat on the back for themselves. Be patient and flexible. Remember, most human beings want to be able to achieve things. Achievement and mastery builds confidence. Where we find that people don't do that, it's often bound to learned helplessness. So to overcome that learned helplessness, we've got to introduce the successes, the joys of achieving. We can use lots of different methods to kind of obviously teach people as far as, prompting, encouraging, using visual, physical clues, hand over hand, placing things closer to somebody. But try and offer, especially those I briefly mentioned there, try and promote success rather than failure. Success builds confidence, but do it in a way where they feel challenged, but they're able to succeed. As far as the process of forward and backward chaining, and we bring in, let's say, things like reinforcements where we can then give successes, give confidence, and obviously encourage a person to complete that task all by themselves. That's our ultimate goal. The aim is to climb the mountain completely from top to bottom, but are we going to start at the bottom or are we going to start slowly working our way down from the top? Whichever method we do, the aim is still, the goal is to climb the mountain, and we're just going to do it one step at a time. Remember, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So whether you're teaching a new skill, whether you're helping somebody to maintain independence or rebuilding confidence, forward and backward chain are powerful tools to support growth and resilience. They remind us that progress is a journey. It's not a race. And every small step forwards matters. One thing when I'm teaching around behavior management is helping people to understand that either we eliminate the stress, we meet their need for them, or we teach them to meet those needs for themselves. The more autonomy and mastery a person has, the higher the level of self-esteem and the higher level of motivation that we're going to get. And if we're looking to improve outcomes for those that we support, those that we care for, those that we love, those that we want the best for, then these are strategies we can use, managing our expectations as well as their own for themselves to get the best. Thanks very much. Let me ask you a question. Do you ever find the pressures of supporting, teaching, or caring for someone else overwhelming and wish you had access to more support and information? The Able to Care podcast, in connection with Able Training, has created the ablehub.uk, where for less than the price of a coffee a week, you can access exclusive podcast content, resources, events, and over 45 certified online courses, covering topics like self-care, understanding dementia, neurodiversity, first aid, conflict management, financial advice, and so much more, with new content and courses being added each month. We are so confident that you will benefit from the Able Hub that we are offering 14 days access completely free of charge. No contract, cancel anytime. Become part of the ablehub.uk community and gain the support, knowledge, and resources you deserve. Don't struggle alone. Be able. Find the link in the description.